Hey guys, tonight we drift gently into the misty morning of an ancient Maori village. The sky above is streaked with pale gold and the ocean sighs against the dark sand. You're not just observing from the edge, you're here barefoot, wrapped in a light flax cloak that rustles softly as you move. The air smells of damp earth and wood smoke. You wander into the village just as its people begin to stir steam rising from cooking pits, and low voices murmuring greetings in Te Reo Maori. Across the clearing, you spot someone sitting cross-legged beside a woven basket, carefully peeling long strips of bark from a freshly felled harakeke plant. Each movement is deliberate. You'll learn quickly here nothing about this place is rushed. Time itself seems to slow down the moment your feet touch the packed earth. Even the dogs stretch lazily in the sun clearly, in no hurry to start their day. But don't let the relaxed vibe fool you. You're about to help create something so sacred, so intricately meaningful that most modern wardrobes would burst into tears from sheer inadequacy. We're talking about the kakahu Maori cloaks, woven not just for warmth or style, but for storytelling, mana, and memory. You'll get bark under your nails, feathers in your hair, and the very real possibility of weaving a pattern wrong and having to undo 12 hours of work. You probably won't survive this level of patience. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights maybe, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start by crouching beside a low fire where tea is simmering in a carved gourd. Someone hands you a cup fragrant with kawakawa leaves and steam. Your guide, an older weaver with a voice like dry flax rustling in wind, tells you the cloak begins long before any threads are tied. It begins with the land. The harakeke plant, also known as New Zealand flax, isn't really flax at all, but don't say that out loud unless you want an eye roll from your host. To the Maori, harakeke is family. The shoots are described in kinship terms. The young child leaves must never be cut, only the parents on the outside. And cutting isn't done willy-nilly. There are chance permissions and a sort of silent reverence you're expected to understand without it being explained. Historians still argue whether these rituals were purely spiritual or a clever form of sustainable harvesting, maybe both. Either way it works. Harakeke thrives under this respectful care, and in return it offers long, strong fibers that can be softened, split, and woven into nearly anything: rope, fishing nets, baskets, mats, and of course cloaks. Today you'll watch as freshly stripped flax is softened by soaking in water for days, sometimes weeks. The fibers are then beaten with a wooden mallet, scraped clean with shells or dog-tooth tools, and finally hung to dry. The process is repetitive, rhythmic, sleepy even. You find yourself lulled by the wet thok-thok of someone pounding strips flat beside you. There's something deeply hypnotic about a task done slowly, the same way for centuries. One woman points out her favorite tool, a short scraper made from albatross bone, worn smooth by generations of hands. She still works better than any machine, she whispers with a smile, as if not to wake the tool itself. You nod, your own fingers aching just from watching. By the afternoon, you're helping to sort the prepared fibers into bundles by texture and color. Not all flax is pale. Some has streaks of green, gold, even red, depending on where it grew and how it was soaked. This one smells like the swamp, someone jokes. You sniff, yep, it does. As the sun lowers, people start gathering near a long post where weaving will begin tomorrow. But for now, the day ends with shared food, laughter, and music. A child plays a koau, a flute carved from bone, and its soft notes drift through the smoky twilight. You sit back warm from the fire, cradling a bowl of cooked kumara, and realize something: this isn't just about making a garment. It's about time, place, people, and memory all being stitched together by hand. Every tug of the thread has meaning. Every pause is part of the design. And in a world that moves too fast, maybe you were overdue for a lesson in slow. You wake to the rustle of woven mats being shaken out and the low hum of voices. The village is already alive. Smoke curls from the cooking fires again, and birds call lazily from the bush beyond the clearings. You rise slowly, stretch, and make your way toward the open-air weaving shelter you glimpsed yesterday. Today, the transformation begins. Before any feathers are chosen, before any patterns emerge, the flax threads must be twisted and rolled. And before that, yes, there's more preparation. You squat beside a pair of hands, deftly rolling thin lengths of softened fiber against the bare thigh. This twisting creates strong two-ply cords called wenyu, the vertical warp lines that will eventually support the whole cloak. It's repetitive and soothing. Even your own clumsy attempts begin to take shape with enough persistence. Though let's be honest, your threads look like soggy spaghetti compared to the clean cords made by your teacher. In the distance, you hear someone chuckle and murmur, "He tau ho, a newcomer." Fair, you probably have feathers in your hair again. Your guide gestures to a large bundle laid out before you. These are the aho, the horizontal weft threads that will weave in and out of the warp. Some are dyed already deep earthy browns, soft grays, even a faded orange red. The dyes come from bark, mud, and moss boiled in old iron pots or hollowed logs. One particular shade, a purplish black, was made from Peru swamp mud so thick and rich it could stain fingernails for days. Good color, that one, your guide says, holding it up with a nod. Lasts forever. Might outlive you. Historians still debate how early Maori weavers achieved such vivid natural dyes without synthetic chemicals. Some say it was purely trial and error. Others argue the dyes were the result of intergenerational scientific observation. Most likely both are true and neither are fast. You run your fingers through the threads, feeling the grain of each one. They aren't uniform. Some are rough, others silky. This, your guide explains, is part of the cloak's soul. Each strand tells its own story, and when woven together, they hum in unison. But there's still one more step before the actual weaving can start. The cloak begins not on a loom, but on a simple wooden turuturu, a horizontal weaving peg set close to the ground. Upright rods mark out the shape of the cloak. The weaver sits cross-legged, leaning slightly forward, and begins at the bottom hem, working upward. You think that seems backwards until you watch how the patterns build. And here's the twist. There's no knotting, no looping. Instead, the weaver uses a technique called watu, a sort of twining, where two weft threads twist around each vertical thread in perfect rhythm. It's like watching fingers dance. You try it, and your hands cramp within minutes. Your neighbor, a young woman with a cheeky grin, watches your struggle and says, "It's like poi, but less forgiving." You smile through the pain. Midway through the morning, someone passes around pieces of dried eel and warm water flavored with fern root. No breaks, just snacks as you work. You learn that some weavers could sit for 12 hours or more, focused entirely on the loom. They say old weavers would talk to the cloak, whispering stories or singing softly as they worked. You glance over at one of the elders who is doing just that, murmuring gently to her half-finished cloak as though it might be listening. Maybe it is. Maybe everything here listens if you're quiet long enough. There's a moment where you look around at the crouched forms, the slow hand motions, the sound of distant waves, and feel like you've stepped back through time. It's oddly calming. You've forgotten your phone, your inbox, and whatever errands your real life had planned. Here, there's only fiber and form. And strangely enough, that feels more real than anything else. By the end of the day, you've managed just a few rows. They're uneven and full of gaps, but you did it. And though your back aches, there's a tiny thread of pride twisting quietly through your chest. The sun is low again, shadows stretch long across the grass. Someone calls for kai dinner, and people slowly begin to stretch, roll their shoulders, and brush off their mats. Your cloak in progress is hung carefully beside the other's clothespins made from smooth bone, holding it like it's something precious, because it is. You eat in warm silence with your fingers. The meal, simple fish, steamed in leaves, sweet potato roasted in coals, and something like spinach sautéed with garlic. Someone's dog nuzzles your ankle, hoping for a scrap. Later, as you lie down to sleep, you run your hands over your own arm, wondering what kind of garment you would be if someone wove you into a cloak. Probably a patch of crooked thread right near the armpit, but maybe you'd hold. You wake before the birds today, stirred by the distant sound of a kowau flute. The melody is slow, almost mournful, floating through the darkness like a memory you can't quite place. You rise quietly, wrapping your cloak around your shoulders, still a bit stiff from yesterday's hours at the turuturu. Your fingers are sore. Your knees remind you they've been cross-legged longer than they ever signed up for. But something calls you out into the bush before first light feathers. Today is a foraging day, and your guide is already waiting near the tree line, carrying a woven bag and a long stick tipped with the soft loop of fiber. No traps, no guns, just gentle coaxing and a lot of waiting. You head into the dense green together under thick ferns and tangled vines, following trails only your guide seems to see. The air is cool and damp heavy with the scent of moss bark and old rain. In the canopy above, the forest begins to stir. A karuru, the fat, sleepy wood pigeon, flaps down awkwardly onto a low branch. They're not subtle birds. If the forest were a party, karuru would be the guest who stumbles into the punch bowl. Aye, but their feathers iridescent, purples and greens that shimmer in sunlight like oil on water. Feathers from these birds and others like the kakatui and huia before they vanished were essential in the making of kahuhuruhuru, the feathered cloaks. Each bird offered something different. The tui's blue-green neck feathers the kaka's russet reds, even the subtle softness of the kiwi. Your guide pauses under a tall tree, presses a finger to their lips, and tilts their head. You both wait. Minutes pass, and then with a single motion, they reach up and gently loop a feather from a fallen karuru perch. No harm done. The bird continues its clumsy waddle, utterly unconcerned. Historians still argue whether feathers were always collected passively or if some were taken more aggressively in earlier centuries. The truth is probably both, but today this forest visit feels more like borrowing than hunting. You collect fallen feathers, tuck them into flax bundles, and whisper quiet thanks to each bird. It's a ritual, even if no one calls it that out loud. By midday, you have a small but rich collection. Each feather is different. Some pristine, some bent at odd angles, but all with color and weight. They'll be cleaned and dried later, then carefully sorted by size, texture, and hue. Nothing is wasted. Even short feathers can be used near the collar or hem where they won't be rubbed as much. Back in the village, the weavers gather around to admire your haul. You're not the only one returning. Others have collected feathers too, some dyed flax, others with bark for boiling new batches of dye. A quiet pride settles over the group. The cloak, after all, is only as beautiful as what you bring to it. You sit near one weaver who's begun adding feathers to her base cloak. The technique is mesmerizing. Each feather is lashed onto a strand of twine fiber with a tiny knot nestled so closely to its neighbor that they overlap like roof tiles. The result is both soft and dense, a surface that ripples when touched and rustles gently in motion. It's not just about aesthetics. A good feather cloak is warm, windproof, and even lightly rain-resistant. In a land where weather shifts without warning, that's no small feat. One weaver pats her nearly finished cloak and jokes, "Better than a raincoat. Smells better too." There's an elder nearby working on something different. A kahukura, a rare type of cloak made from dog hair. You blink. Dog hair. You glance around. Where are the dogs? A few sleepy ones lounge in the sun nearby. But your guide explains that in the past, specially bred kuri, a now extinct Polynesian dog, provided the dense undercoat used for these cloaks. Their hair was prized for its softness and warmth, especially in colder regions. Today, of course, most such cloaks are museum pieces. You'll never see a new one made. But once upon a time, they were the mark of someone important, high-ranking, sacred even. The elder lets you touch one old cloak stored in a carved wooden box wrapped in oil-scented cloth. It feels like nothing you've ever touched. Dense, warm, with a slightly lanolin-like scent. You try to imagine someone hundreds of years ago walking through misty mountains with this draped over their shoulders. Maybe a warrior, maybe a chief, maybe just someone who got cold easily. As the day ends, a group begins to sing around the fire. Not loudly, just soft harmonies that rise and fall like waves. You lean back, feathers in your lap, fingers idly twirling a flax strand, and listen. You think about the birds again. The ones that gave these gifts, the ones that may never fly again. There's both sadness and reverence in that thought. The Maori word for kobakakahu can mean to clothe, but it also means to honor, to hold, to wrap. And in that moment, you understand. The next morning, the village is quieter than usual. Even the dogs seem to pad around with extra softness, tails swishing through dew-heavy grass. There's a hush in the air, a feeling more than a sound. You're told it's because today someone is preparing to weave a wariki. Not every cloak starts with feathers. In fact, many begin with a foundation of finely woven flax mat called a wariki that serves as the invisible structure beneath the flourish. Think of it as the underpainting of a masterpiece or the blank canvas upon which the cloak story will emerge. You settle into the shaded weaving shelter, now lined with half-finished mats. These aren't the thick, plain floor coverings you might have seen in museums or movies. No, these are delicate, precise pattern down to the last fiber with edges so clean they could have been cut by glass. Their makers don't just sit and knot, they breathe with the threads. You watch a weaver tie the beginning strands to the pegs of her turuturu. Her hands move with such familiarity, you'd swear the flax was guiding her. She hums a low tune as she works. There's rhythm in it like the swing of a pendulum. Want to try? She asks, handing you a narrow bundle of dried harakeke. You nod bravely. What follows is a cascade of gentle humiliation. Your first rows are uneven. You pull too tight on one side, not enough on the other. Your angles go wonky. Somewhere in the middle, a small child watching you attempts not to laugh and fails. You glance over at your guide who offers a grin that reads, "It's okay. The mat's not judging you." Historians still debate how early Maori weavers were trained. Was it through formal apprenticeship? Casual imitation family lineage? Most likely it varied by iwi and time period, but one thing is certain, mastery wasn't optional. These weren't decorative crafts, they were identity in thread form. A poorly made cloak could embarrass an entire hapu. The wariki also carried messages, some woven in geometric motifs, others hidden within stitch counts. A certain number of rows might honor a lost ancestor. A change in the weaving angle could symbolize a journey or return. These codes weren't written down. They were passed through hands and eyes. If you didn't know the language, you didn't know the story. You sit beside a weaver named Tui, who's working on a base mat for a child's cloak. She points out a zigzag pattern along the hem. "That's for his grandfather," she says softly. "A fisherman. Always said the sea had teeth. The rows ripple like waves. You help gather stones to weigh down the ends of the mat. As it grows longer, smooth round ones warmed by the sun, they sit quietly on the flax, anchoring it to the earth, reminding you that even the most intricate work needs gravity." During a short rest, someone brings over bowls of mashed fern root and fresh fish. You eat sitting cross-legged in the shade, a soft breeze moving the hanging cloaks like breath. A toddler waddles over, clutching a strip of weaving in one fist and a half-eaten plum in the other. She offers you both. You choose the weaving, and she nods solemnly as if you passed a test. Later in the afternoon, you're invited to help boil bark to dye a new set of threads. The dye pot is carved into the earth, ringed with stones. Inside, strips of raurakau bark simmer slowly in water, giving off a rich tannin scent. Someone adds a pinch of ash for depth. Someone else stirs with a stick darkened by years of use. As the light turns golden, the dyed strands are pulled out, cooled, and laid across wooden racks to dry. You run your fingers along one, it's warm, damp, and smells faintly like old tea. The color is deep and soft, not red, not brown, but somewhere in between. The kind of shade you could wrap a memory in and keep it safe. You're told this batch is for a kahu wahine, a woman's cloak being made for a coming-of-age ceremony. It'll have both flax and feathers woven with symbols only the girl's family will recognize. When she wears it, it'll be like stepping into a story only she can read. By sunset, the wariki is half finished. You sit and watch as Tui's fingers tie the last knot of the day. There's no applause, no dramatic flourish. Just a quiet nod, a stretch of tired arms, and the satisfaction of knowing something new exists in the world now, something made of patience, purpose, and thread. You lie back on the grass, staring up at the first stars. A chill creeps in, and you pull your own cloak tighter around your shoulders. It's still rough, still incomplete, but tonight it feels like more than fabric. It feels like belonging. By now, you've got a decent grasp of the basics, twisting flax into cords, weaving warp and weft, dyeing with bark and smoke. Your knees still hate the sitting posture, your fingers are stiff, and your practice cloak looks a bit like it lost an argument with a hedgehog. But there's something soothing about the rhythm of it all. Your thoughts move slower here. The noise in your mind fades each time your hands begin to move. Today, though you're not working, you're watching. A crowd has gathered near the village center where an elder is about to display one of the great treasures of the hapu, a kahu huruhuru, or feather cloak handed down through generations. The kind of cloak you've only seen behind museum glass, never held, never worn, never moving in the wind. Until now, everyone falls silent as the box is brought out. It's carved with patterns that swirl like waves and bird tracks. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth and fragrant leaves, lies the cloak. And it is breathtaking. No photo, no replica, no digital rendering could have prepared you. The feathers, a small, precise layered like fish scales, shift slightly with every breath of wind. Colors you can't quite name ripple across the surface. Iridescent greens, dusty reds, smoky blacks. The pattern moves in quiet diagonals, drawing your eyes up toward the shoulders where the densest plumage lives. You find yourself holding your breath, afraid to disturb it with sound. You notice how heavy it looks, not bulky, just dense, like it holds time, and maybe it does. The elder lifts the cloak with slow, reverent hands. She doesn't wear it, this one isn't for wearing anymore, but she lets the children touch it softly on the edge. You follow suit, your fingers brushing feathers that once belonged to birds, now gone from the forests. The haya, the moa, the piopio, their legacy still here stitched into silence. Historians still argue whether cloaks like these were purely ceremonial or also practical. Some say they were worn only for speeches, rituals, and high diplomacy. Others believe they were part of daily life for those of high mana rank, power, personal prestige. Truthfully, it likely depended on the cloak and the wearer. This one clearly wasn't for fetching firewood. As you sit listening to stories about the cloak's history, you begin to understand how garments can become living records. Every feather, every thread holds a whisper of who made it, who wore it, what they stood for. There's a kind of archive here of afor, artistry and belief, far more personal than any book. The elder tells you the cloak's name. Yes, it has a name. Rango Piki Tarengi, peace that climbs the sky. You murmur it under your breath. It feels soft in the mouth, like something you shouldn't say too loudly. Later, a younger weaver explains how names are given. Some are chosen when the cloak is finished, others emerge during the making. Sometimes a weaver will wake with a name on their tongue unasked and know the cloak has named itself. You walk with her through the village, passing other works. In progress, a blue-dyed flax mat hung up to dry feathers laid out like a painter's palette, threads soaking in smoky water. She points to her own cloak, halfway done. Haven't heard its name yet, she says with a shrug. Maybe it's shy. Back at your own weaving post, you pick up your unfinished piece and look at it differently, not just as a project, but as something that might be waiting to speak. You tie another row, then another. Your knots are getting tighter, your hands move a little more confidently. Your body still aches, but it's the ache of learning, of becoming part of something older than memory. As the sky dims, the elder returns the cloak to its box. Everyone stands as it's wrapped up again like a great sleeping bird. You find yourself whispering Rongo Pikiterangi once more, as if the name might nest in your chest for safekeeping. That night, as you drift off under your rough flax blanket, your dreams are feathered, soft, vivid, filled with wind and birdsong. You wake at dawn with one clear thought: this isn't just clothing, it's ceremony, it's memory, it's love disguised as thread and patience. You wake to rain, not a downpour, just a fine, steady mist that paints everything silver. The trees bead with droplets. The roofs of the woven huts glisten like fish scales. Your flax cloak, rough as it is, beads water right off. You're impressed. You didn't think it would be that functional. Then again, these cloaks were made for this exact landscape. Rain isn't an inconvenience here, it's a rhythm. This morning's weaving takes place indoors, if you can call the open-sided meeting shelter indoors. Smoke from a low fire curls into the beams above. The floor is cool beneath your legs. It smells like rain, charcoal, and damp wool. Your teacher for the day is a man named Hemi, whose hands are as wide as dinner plates and twice as careful. He's working on a cloak for his niece's hara kauhatu, a headstone unveiling ceremony. The cloak is dark, woven tight, and includes strands dyed with soot and crushed charcoal to honor the memory of someone lost. It's not flashy, it's quiet, and that's the point. He shows you a technique called muka wakarunga, an upward twining method used to strengthen the lower rows of a cloak. You try it, it feels unnatural at first, like brushing your teeth with the wrong hand, but your fingers eventually find a rhythm, your breath syncing with the movement. You're weaving backwards into the future, Hemi says with a smile. The line sticks with you. Historians still debate the spiritual symbolism behind cloak construction. Some argue that working from the bottom up represents the journey from earth to sky or from childhood to adulthood. Others say it's purely practical gravity, just makes it easier that way. But watching Hemi, who pauses every few rows to softly chant or hum, you suspect both meanings live in the same gesture. As the morning rolls on, you notice something odd. A few weavers are incorporating bits of shell bone, even tiny carved pendants into their cloaks. They tie them in with flax or hang them from the corners. One has a single ere puta, a whale tooth pendant tucked into the hem. Not for display, but for grounding, for memory. You ask about it, and an older woman tells you the tradition goes way back. Some cloaks were made not just to warm the body, but to protect it from cold yes, but also from grief, bad dreams, or spiritual harm. Adding a sacred object, especially one from a family member, could turn the cloak into a kind of wearable prayer. It makes sense. After all, the cloak isn't just worn, it wraps, it carries. There's a quiet moment after lunch when most of the weavers take a rest. You lie back on the mat watching the ceiling, feeling the rain settle into a hush. Someone hands you a strip of dry flax and says, "Just play." So you do. You twist and braid, loop and knot until something shapeless takes form. It's not beautiful, doesn't have to be, but it's yours. In the afternoon, Hemi shows you how to add fringe to the edge of the cloak. It's not decorative. Well, it is, but it's also practical. Fringe softens the edge, prevents fraying, adds weight to the hem, so it hangs just right. And if done properly, it sways with your steps like the tail of a taniwa, one of the old water spirits said to guard rivers and lakes. You chuckle at the comparison, and Hemi shrugs. Why shouldn't a cloak have a little magic? You tie the fringe carefully, each knot deliberate. The pattern grows outward like ripples on a lake. You're told this cloak will be worn just once, then tucked away for safekeeping. Not because it's fragile, but because its purpose is complete. Like a letter you don't reread or a bowl meant to be gifted full and returned empty. By the end of the day, you're tired in that good way. The rain has stopped. Everything smells clean, washed. Someone's preparing dinner, roasted fern root, and fish steamed in leaves. You hear laughter again, that soft, unbothered kind that lives close to the fire. Before bed, you sit with Hemi and show him your progress. He nods, doesn't speak for a moment, then says, "You're not fast. But you're learning where to slow down. That's harder." You smile, take that as the compliment it is. As you drift off that night, you imagine wrapping yourself in one of these cloaks, not for warmth, but for courage. A woven map of all your mistakes held together by all the things you didn't rush. Maybe that's what these cloaks really are, reminders that even tangled threads can become something whole if given enough time. You awake to the smell of smoke, not the harsh kind, but the sweet, earthy scent of something being slow cooked in wood ash. Outside, dawn filters through mist again, and this time the whole village is wrapped in a soft, gray light. It's cloak weather. You can almost hear the flax sigh in approval. Today's focus is on finishing, not the final flourish kind of finishing, but the invisible, patient kind. The kind that turns a woven mass into something wearable. You start your morning by watching as two weavers spread out a nearly complete kahu huruhuru across a long bench. It's like preparing a tapestry for inspection. No ceremony, just quiet attention. They begin gently brushing each row of feathers, smoothing them with woven combs and long tufts of toi grass. The feathers are checked one by one, realigned and trimmed with bone shears if needed. One loose quill gets tugged free, held to the light, and discarded like it was always meant to be lost. It's oddly intimate, like grooming a beloved pet or brushing the hair of a sleeping child. The cloak shivers slightly under the breeze. You feel as though it's breathing. There's also a smoke hut nearby where cloaks are sometimes cured. You peek inside and find rows of garments hanging from low rafters, each absorbing the scent of slow-burning manuka wood. This isn't just for show. The smoke helps preserve the flax repel insects and add a kind of softness to the fibers. One elder swears it also calms the cloak. You don't ask what that means. You kind of get it. Historians still debate how common this curing process was. Some records suggest only high-status cloaks were smoked. Others hint it may have been a regional custom. But everyone agrees on the outcome: cloaks that last. Some over 2 centuries old are still intact thanks to smoke care and a stubborn sense of craftsmanship. You try your hand at brushing your own tangled trial cloak. It's not elegant, but you work slowly, carefully. You've learned not to tug too hard, not to rush. You fluff a few bent feathers and let them be. Perfection isn't the goal, cohesion is. Cloaks aren't meant to impress everyone, just the right people. By late morning, you help lay out another nearly completed cloak. This one has a special border along the hem woven with dyed pingao, a golden coastal sedge that catches the light like threads of sunlight. It crackles slightly when you touch it, delicate but resilient. It's used sparingly like seasoning on a dish, just enough to catch the eye. The weaver next to you, a wiry man with a voice like gravel, explains that certain designs are tapu sacred and shouldn't be copied without permission. You nod. He sees you understand and points to a specific pattern on the shoulder, a triangle of dark feathers stitched in a spiral. That's for safe passage, over water, over land, even over into the next world. You ask if every cloak has something like that. He shrugs. Every cloak wants something. It's up to you to listen. You return to your seat with that thought echoing in your mind. Lunch is light smoked fish, soft taro, and a small handful of forest berries. You eat in comfortable silence, watching a pair of children mimic the older weavers with strips of flax and toy cloaks for their dolls. One insists she's making a cloak for the moon. The other corrects her. It's for a taniwha who lives under the village. Either way you approve. In the afternoon, you get to watch the addition of the final cord ties, long, smooth flax strands twisted into braids, then looped through reinforced eyelets near the collar. These cords aren't just fasteners. They're anchors. They allow the cloak to drape properly, rest on the shoulders with balance, and move her with the wearer. Get them wrong, and the whole thing sags. Get them right, and the cloak sings. You tie your own cord hands, trembling slightly. It's crooked. You redo it. And again, third time's the charm. It's not beautiful, but it holds. The sun begins to drop, casting long shadows across the village. A gentle wind picks up, ruffling the drying cloaks like sails. One is lifted briefly by the breeze and sways with such grace it almost seems alive. And someone nearby murmurs, "She's ready," and you believe her. That night, the fire burns low, and someone begins to tell stories not just of people, but of cloaks. The one worn by the great chief who made peace between warring tribes. The one that vanished in a colonial museum for 80 years before being returned. The one that was never finished but still kept folded like a question mark. You listen wrapped in your scratchy little cloak and wonder what your story will be. Maybe it's this sitting among strangers who no longer feel like strangers, holding threads that have outlived generations and learning how to see silence as part of the pattern. The morning is unusually bright. Sunlight slants through the canopy with more confidence than usual, painting gold across the leaves and casting long, swaying shadows on the ground. You feel the warmth on your arms before you even open your eyes. It's a perfect day for feathers. Today is about color, not the muted earth tones of dyed flax, but the brilliant iridescent bursts found only in nature. Feathers are being sorted, selected, and prepared for one of the village's rarest undertakings, the beginning of a full kahuhuruhuru, a chief's cloak of entirely feathered construction. This is not a casual garment. This is prestige, identity, and political force woven into something wearable. When a chief walks wearing one of these, he doesn't just arrive, he arrives. You gather near the central weaving space where bundles of feathers are being laid out on white bark cloth, reds from the kakadeep greens from Tui, steel grays from Kareru, and the rare black and white tail feathers of the extinct huia. These last ones are treated with quiet reverence. Only a few are left preserved like rare pearls. They're not for use, just memory. Your guide today is Wira, a master weaver known for her stillness. She speaks rarely, but when she does, every sentence lands like a proverb. She gestures for you to sit as she begins laying out the feather plan, not just by color, but by flow. Cloaks must move like water. The feathers must overlap in a way that lets them ripple, never bunch, and respond to motion with grace. It's part engineering, part choreography. Historians still argue whether the cloak's patterns were coded with genealogy, specific layouts meant to reference lineage, ancestry, or tribal alliances. Some believe every angle and stripe has meaning. Others suggest aesthetics played a larger role. Wera simply shrugs and says, "A cloak remembers more than we do. Your task is humble to help trim and sort the feathers. You work alongside a few others, carefully laying out each bundle, brushing the feathers gently with soft flax combs to remove dust and trimming damaged barbs. Every so often you find one that catches the light just right, gleaming green or blue or violet. You hold it to your chest like a treasure, and Wira, passing behind you, murmurs, 'That one's proud.' It's hard to explain, but you know exactly what she means." As the day unfolds, you watch her begin the first rows of the cloak. Unlike the looser open weave of everyday kakahu, this piece has a dense, reinforced backing. Every feather is tied into place with a tiny double knot, its shaft nestled just beneath the surface of the weave. The spacing is tight, less than a finger's width between them. You marvel at how slowly it goes. One row can take hours, but no one is hurrying. There's tea, boiling, birds calling in the trees, and distant laughter from the children learning to braid strips of dyed flax into tiny doll cloaks. Everyone here is busy, and yet nothing feels rushed. During lunch, steamed shellfish and sweet roasted yam, you sit beside Wira and ask her how long this cloak will take to finish. She doesn't answer right away, just looks over the feathers, brushes a bit of dust from her lap, and says, "It's not a race. The cloak will let us know." Later, you return to your own weaving post. Your trial cloak is slowly becoming less embarrassing. You've added a new stripe of pale blue flax and a single row of duck feathers, not traditional, but soft and pleasing to the touch. You smile suddenly, remembering that the ancient word huatu, to weave, also means to observe. Somehow the two feel the same now. A little boy passes by and stops to look at your work. "Who's that for?" he asks. You pause. "I think me." He nods solemnly as though you've made the right choice and wanders off. In the late afternoon, someone begins chanting. A soft karakia or prayer drifts over the weaving circle. It's not for ceremony, it's for the birds. A song of thanks, of memory, a way to acknowledge what was taken and what was gifted. You close your eyes and listen the words wrapping around you like another kind of cloak. When you open them again, the feathers are glowing in the low sun. Reds like embers, greens like deep water, blues like distant sky. You sit with that for a while. Just sit. No doing, no learning, no fixing. Just watching the feathers move in the light and feeling time dissolve into color and stillness. The air today is heavy with humidity, thick enough to soften your thoughts. Even the birds seem slower this morning, their calls more languid, drifting lazily across the village. You're starting to feel it too. That subtle shift where each day flows into the next, marked not by hours, but by the slow progression of the cloak on your lap. Today, something changes. Instead of working in the main weaving space, you're invited to sit with a small group on the edge of the forest clearing. There's a hushed tone to it, half casual, half sacred. You're told this gathering is to weave kakahupepi cloaks for babies. You blink. Cloaks. For babies, yes, and not just decorative ones either. These were once essential items, swaddling cloaks, sometimes small, sometimes elaborately detailed, made from soft flax or down feathers, and used to wrap newborns during their earliest days. Warmth, protection, but also symbolism. Just as warriors wore cloaks of honor, so too did the newest lives begin wrapped in care. You're given soft, pre-soaked flax and shown how to weave smaller panels with tighter knots. The rhythm is the same, but the purpose feels different, more tender. This isn't about making something grand, it's about holding something precious. Your hands move slowly. You find yourself thinking of your own childhood, the things you were wrapped in, protected by, or maybe wished you'd had. A thought flutters by light as a feather. Maybe we all deserve a baby cloak again now and then. One of the women beside you, Ada, whose laugh comes from somewhere deep in her belly, leans over and gently presses a small downy feather into your hand. "For the heart," she says. You tie it into the corner of your panel without asking where it came from. Historians still argue about the role of kakahupepi in larger Maori tradition. Were they spiritual objects? Practical baby wraps, or both records, suggest they were often buried with infants who passed young symbols of comfort and remembrance. But in other stories, they were passed down, saved, cherished, like lullabies you could touch. As you work, someone nearby begins to hum an old lullaby in Te Reo Maori. The sound is soft, hypnotic, the kind of melody that wraps around your ribs and rocks you without moving. You sway slightly without meaning to. After a while, someone brings around a woven basket of dried fruits and soft cooked root vegetables. You nibble, but mostly you sip warm kawakawa tea and continue tying the edge of your tiny cloak. It's not for anyone in particular, but it still feels important, like you're making space for someone even if they're not here yet. Later, you help carry finished kakahupepi to a small hut where they're laid in baskets lined with soft moss and clean leaves. You pause to look at them, tiny, feathered, perfect. You wonder how many lives have been swaddled in cloth like this, how many stories started in these folds. Back outside, the sun has reached its highest point. You lie on your back in the grass, cloak beneath your head, watching clouds move slowly above the trees. Your hands smell like flax and wood smoke. You can feel the imprint of weaving on your fingertips. Not pain, not discomfort, just a numb imprint. Memory made physical. A group of children runs past chasing a dog with a string of feathers in its mouth. A woman yells playfully after them, "Ka mau te wehi." You don't know the exact translation, but you can understand the tone, something like, "That's amazing," or "Good on you." You grin. It fits. Someone sits beside you. Ada again, she hands you a small bundle of thread and says, "Tie a knot for someone you miss." You don't think, you just do. The knot isn't perfect. It leans to the left, but it holds. And maybe that's the whole point of this place. Not perfection, but holding, wrapping, remembering. Letting the work of your hands say the things your mouth can't. That night you dream of feathers falling slowly from the sky, not plummeting, not drifting, but floating with a purpose you don't understand. You wake with one thought in your head. Every cloak begins as a promise. You wake to silence. Not the kind that means something's wrong, but the thick, comforting quiet of early morning just before the world begins to stretch. Even the birds seem to be holding their breath. You step outside your hut and find the village still asleep, wrapped in mist like an old friend. Today feels slower, heavier. There's something different in the air. You're told that a tangihanga, a mourning ceremony, is beginning today. Someone has died. An elder known not only for their weaving, but for the stories they wove into every strand. Their passing is not a surprise, but it still hits hard. And now the village prepares to honor them the only way they know how, through ritual, memory, and cloak. You're invited to observe, not intrude. You nod and follow quietly as preparations unfold. At the center of the village near the meeting house, a long wooden platform has been constructed. Draped over it are not flowers, not garlands, but cloaks, dozens of them. Some simple, others brilliantly feathered, all laid out like offerings of thread and time. Each one tells a chapter of this person's life. A youth cloak of plain flax, a middle year's cloak with bark-dyed patterns, a senior cloak with a row of tui feathers along the hem. The final one, still unfinished, rests folded at the edge. The threads trail like thoughts left unsaid. One by one, people arrive and add their own cloaks. These aren't just garments, they're gifts. At a tangihanga, it is tradition to cloak the deceased with symbols of respect, lineage, and connection. Sometimes the cloaks are retrieved later to be passed on. Sometimes they're buried or burned with the body. It depends. No one rushes the decision. Historians still discuss the origins of this practice, whether it began with chiefly lineages or grew from communal traditions. Some think it was spiritual, others believe it served a more material function. But here now, it is plainly love. The cloaks laid like arms across shoulders, one final time. You sit cross-legged. Near the gathering, your trial cloak folded on your lap. You won't add it, it's not finished and not worthy, but you hold it as a gesture. You think about all the cloaks this person must have made, the ones worn by children now grown, the ones draped across warriors, the ones that disappeared, gifted, lost, returned. Someone nearby speaks in a low voice, telling a story about the elder's first weaving attempt. It fell apart in the rain, they laugh. Flax turned to spaghetti. People chuckle, and the tension loosens. Even grief here has room for lightness. You're invited later to walk past the platform and touch one of the cloaks if you wish. Your fingers settle gently on a row of dark feathers, soft as breath. It hums under your touch, not in sound, but in memory. In the afternoon, singing begins. Waiatatangi laments that lift and fall like wind. No one leads, it just happens, as if the very air knows the melody. The words are poetic, sometimes improvised, describing not just the loss, but the life. There's no sharp edge to it, just ache wrapped in sound. You sit with the weavers sharing tea and soft bread. No one talks about their own work today. It's a day of pause, of presence. As the sun begins to drop, someone stands and carefully drapes the unfinished cloak over the elder's shoulders. The strands hang loose like dreams still forming, and somehow that feels right. Not everything is meant to be finished. Some things are meant to be passed on. That night, the fire burns quietly, and people speak in low tones about thread tension, dye failures, the exact moment they learned how to tie a stable fringe. Memories shared in the language of craft. It's not sad exactly. It's just soft. You lie in your bedroll, the smell of smoke in your hair, and think about the first time you held flax in your hands. How clumsy it felt. How impossible. And now here you are tangled into this story. You close your eyes and picture the elders' hands, wrinkled, firm, stained by bark and soot. You imagine them working a loom under moonlight, humming to the threads, weaving not for glory, but for meaning. You dream of feathers again. But this time, they rise, not fall. The morning after the Tankahanga, the village moves gently like it's exhaling. There's a hush in the way people walk, a kindness in the way tools are passed, cloaks adjusted. No loud greetings, no scraping of pots. Just the soft return to life. You return to your weaving spot and find your seat has been swept. Your tools laid neatly beside your half-finished cloak. Someone even left a small folded leaf with 2 berries on it. A quiet gift, a reminder continue. You pick up the threads and begin to tie. Today your teacher is Mara, a woman with arms like river branches, and a voice that always sounds like she's on the verge of telling a secret. She grins when she sees your cloak, still standing good. Time for the real lessons. She doesn't mean technique, she means people. Weaving, she says, as she begins twining her own theme piece, is where all the gossip lives. You glance around and suddenly you notice it, how the weavers talk. About everything. About nothing, births, marriages, who's got a crush on who. Whether it's going to rain again, who burned the taro last week, the cloak is just the backdrop. And then, the flirtation. A young man from the Piauhara Nui, the guest house, sits nearby, supposedly untangling threads. But his eyes wander toward one of the younger weavers. She pretends not to notice, but her knots suddenly become much neater. Mara nudges you and whispers, "They've been dancing around each other for weeks." She's weaving him into her border. You look closer. She has small knotted flourishes, only noticeable if you know what to look for. Little curves, loops, the tiniest shift in color, her signature hidden in plain sight. Historians still argue whether cloaks were used to embed courtship signals. Some deny it altogether. Others insist certain stitches were understood as intimate language, like braiding someone's name into a secret. In any case, the weavers here certainly act like it's true. You're invited to try, to add something to your own cloak that means nothing to others but everything to you. A loop, a broken knot, a color choice that reminds you of a laugh or a day you didn't want to end. You choose a single red feather. Just one, hidden under the left collar where no one will see it unless they're holding you. By mid-morning, laughter breaks out as someone tells a story about a wedding cloak that got unraveled when the bride tripped over a dog. Another woman adds how a man once asked for a cloak covered in nothing but feathers, not because he was noble, but because he wanted to look taller. Someone asks if anyone's ever made a cloak for a marriage proposal. A quiet nod. He made it for her, but didn't say what it was for, just handed it over. She said yes. Weaving, it turns out, isn't just utility. It's flirtation, it's humor, it's hope. Every knot might be a question. Every feather a maybe. Later, Mara shows you how to braid 3 different flax fibers into a cord called tara, used sometimes as belts, but often as decorative elements in cloaks. She lets you choose the color. You pick a pale blue, a soft brown, and 1 streak of black. She watches your fingers and nods. That looks like a good lie. You raise your eyebrows. She laughs. The best love stories are lies until they're not. That night, a small group gathers under the stars for music. There's a guitar modern out of place, but no one minds. The singing shifts between old chants and modern songs with new words and old rhythms. You hear someone whisper this was the song he sang to her after the 3rd time she said no. You don't know who he or she is, it doesn't matter. The story is stitched into the notes and into the chuckles that follow. You sit with your half cloak, your hidden red feather, your braided cord of almost truth. You look at the stars and wonder how many stories are hidden in the cloaks, buried under earth, packed in museum crates, or worn proudly once and then folded away forever. You think of what Mara said, still standing good. Maybe that's all weaving really is, tying one strand to the next, even when everything else tries to come undone. By now, you move like you belong. No one watches your hands when you sit at the loom. No one corrects your posture when you fetch fresh flax. You're just part of the flow. The weaving hut has become your home. Within a home, a place where time doesn't march, it meanders. Today's lesson begins with silence, a kind of reverent pause. You follow the others into the forest again, but this time the mood is heavier. You're here to speak to the birds. Not literally, of course, but to remember them, to honor them, because the cloaks you've been admiring, the feathered masterpieces so rich in history, came with a cost often hidden beneath their beauty extinction. You sit in a clearing surrounded by towering trees and overgrown vines, where the sounds of the forest are thinner than they used to be. Your guide today is Rangi, a quiet man who carries a feather bound into his braid. He doesn't say much at first. He just leads you to a small, sun-dappled space where carved wooden birds perch on stones tucked among ferns. A kind of memorial, not flashy, just true. He begins speaking not to you, but around you, as though the forest itself is listening. About the huia, the bird whose tail feathers once denoted rank now gone. About the piopio, the shy, brown songbird that sang softly enough to soothe babies. Gone. About the wekau, the laughing owl. Gone, all used, all woven, all vanished. Historians still debate the exact causes: overhunting, habitat, loss invasive predators, or the ravenous appetite of colonial collectors. The truth is, it's all of the above. Feathered cloaks were powerful, beautiful, but also sometimes greedy. Rangi places a single feather, a replica black and white, at the base of a carved huia. You and the others do the same. A ritual of acknowledgement, not blame, not apology, just presence. Back in the village, the mood shifts, again gentle but grounded. This isn't a scolding, it's a balance. For every feather woven, a responsibility is remembered. You gather with a group preparing synthetic feathers crafted from dyed flax bark fiber, even recycled thread. Not to mimic, not to fake, but to honor the shape without borrowing from what's no longer ours to take. Some modern kahu haruharu now blend natural and artificial feathers, balancing tradition with conservation. And they're just as stunning. You sit beside a teenage weaver who tells you she's never seen a real hoya feather, only pictures. But I dream of them sometimes, she says, matter of fact, like they remember me. You don't question it, some memories outlive bodies. In the afternoon, you're invited to help weave one of these blended cloaks. The process is nearly identical, but now you see it differently. Every feather reel or crafted feels like a choice, not a default. You twist strands into place. Your fingers find rhythm. The flax slides more easily now. You've stopped overthinking each motion. The cloak begins to take shape, not just physically, but emotionally. It has a weight, not sadness exactly, not regret, just memory. Later, you listen to a story about the last known huia seen by a farmer in 1907. She flew away before he could catch her, someone says. Smart bird. You smile. You hope she's still flying somewhere behind the clouds. Dinner's quiet that night. Not somber, just thoughtful. People eat in twos and threes, murmuring, trading soft jokes. You sit beside Rangi, who says every thread holds something, even silence. You look down at your own piece, the red feather, the pale flax, the imperfect knots. You think of all the birds whose wings now live only in stories. You press your palm to your chest and whisper not a word, but a breath. A thank you. As you fall asleep, you imagine a forest full of birdsong, not memories, not recordings, just wild, alive, uncounted voices rising and falling in a song too vast for us to capture. A song that knows its own name. The next morning, the light is golden and sharp, one of those rare days where the sky feels endless, and even the leaves seem to shimmer with confidence. You wake with the taste of something old and powerful in your thoughts, like you've dreamt of thread that stretches across generations and woke up still tangled in it. Today, your path leads you not to a loom or a bundle of flax, but to a house near the edge of the village. Inside waits a woman named Kaya Mir, one of the oldest and most respected weavers in the region. No one speaks when they enter her home. They lower their heads, remove their shoes. It's not fear, it's reverence, like walking into a book that's still being written one strand at a time. Kuya Mir has fingers like twisted vines and eyes that see right through your practiced smile. She greets you with a nod, gestures toward a woven mat, and simply says, "You're late. Come sit." You do. On the walls hang cloaks so old they seem fossilized flax so finely woven it resembles silk feathers faded to soft ghosts of their original hues. There's one with a hem of dog hair so fine you have to squint to see the weave. These are Kakahurangatira cloaks of chiefs, and Koyamere made them, well, most of them. Some were started by her grandmother, others passed down from even earlier. Every generation adds one row, she tells you. The cloak grows, slowly, like a mountain. You're shown one in progress. The fibers are finer than any you've worked with. The knots so tight they almost hum. A design flows through it, a repeating spiral that seems to twist as you stare at it. You ask what it means. She smiles faintly. And it's not for you to know, but it's good that you asked. You nod. You're learning that part of being here isn't mastery. It's curiosity. Willingness to listen to stories that might not include you, but still let you sit nearby. Kuya Mer begins to speak of names of women who wove through war, famine, colonization, and loss. Tsukothin, women who carried their iwi on their backs, not just metaphorically, but literally through cloaks woven in hardship and worn in pride. She says their names slowly, like weaving each syllable into the air. You try to hold them in your memory, but they flutter away like birds. Don't worry, she says. They'll come back if you treat your thread with care. Historians still puzzle over the role of women in early Maori weaving traditions. Some claim it was domestic utilitarian. Others argue it was political, sacred, powerful. Koyamare doesn't bother with the debate. We wove. They ruled. Sometimes we did both. She shows you one more cloak, its colors subtle, its feathers few, but its weave so precise it almost looks machined. My mother's, she says, her fingers brushing it like a blessing. Every knot is a sentence. If you could read it, you'd know who she loved and who she never forgave. You sit with that, let it settle. After tea, steep kawakawa, of course, with honey and crushed leaf, you help her prepare new fibers. You work slower than usual, more carefully. Her silence isn't cold, it's testing. You're not trying to impress, you're just trying to be worthy of staying. She watches you tie 3 perfect knots and then intentionally undo them. You look at her puzzled. She says weaving isn't just what you make, it's what you're willing to unmake. You undo your 4th knot slower this time. It feels right. As the sun begins to lower behind the trees, you help her pack away the unfinished cloak. She wraps it in a bark-stained cloth and ties it shut with a single red thread. You recognize the gesture, a promise to return. Before you leave, she hands you a thin strip of patterned flax dyed a deep green and lined with a single row of tiny white shells. It's not a cloak, she says, it's a reminder. You'll know when to use it. You bow your head, say thank you. She simply waves you off, already lost in some memory that doesn't need you in it. As you walk back through the village, twilight warming the sky, you run your thumb over the flax strip. The shells clink softly like a whispered yes. You tuck it carefully into your cloak pocket beside the hidden red feather. That night before sleep, you don't weave. You just sit listening to the wind thread itself through the trees, thinking of names you don't know how to pronounce yet, and the stories they're still waiting to share. By now, your fingers move without asking permission. You sit down at the weaving post, and they begin twisting, pulling, tying like they've done this 1,000 times before. And in a way, maybe they have. Every step you've taken in this village has stitched another thread into your body, another knot into your memory. The cloak on your lap is no longer a mess of mistakes. It's becoming something real. Today, the lesson turns to value, not the kind you can count, but the kind you feel. You're helping Hira, a soft-spoken weaver with eyes like polished obsidian who's working on a project unlike anything you've seen so far. It's not a ceremonial cloak, not for a chief, not for a child. It's a trade cloak, a kakahu utu, a cloak given in exchange, in negotiation, in payment. You pause. People traded these Hira nods all the time. Food, tools, peace. She smiles faintly, wants a whole waka, a canoe, for a cloak. You blink, she continues. They weren't just clothing, they were currency. A high-quality cloak could settle debts, mark alliances, or smooth over conflict between hapu. Some cloaks ended wars, others started marriages. A few caused the opposite. You think back to your tangled red feather? Yep, that tracks. As you work with her laying out flax and preparing the fringe, she explains how each trade required not just value, but mana. A cloak only worked as currency if it held enough personal significance. The weaver mattered. The materials mattered. You couldn't just whip something together and hope for respect. It had to carry something. Historians still argue how widespread cloak-based trade really was. Some say it was rare reserve for high-ranking exchanges. Others claim it was surprisingly common, especially in regions where flax and birds thrived. But either way, the truth is this: a cloak could buy peace if woven well enough. You help Hira select fibers dyed with black mud and forest bark. This cloak has a quiet power to it, dark colors, subtle patterns, and a texture that seems to hum when the light hits it. You run your hand along the edge and feel how tight the weave is. This one won't fray, not even in rain or negotiation. You ask who the cloak is for. Hira pauses, an iwi across the water, a land matter, a gift before talk. Then she adds, "It must speak before we do." You sit with that. How many times have you tried to speak without listening first? Later, you're shown an old ledger from a time when cloaks were itemized, recorded by colonial officials like numbers on a ledger. 1 kahu huruhuru for 3 pigs, 1 kakahu muka for 5 crates of flour. The equations feel hollow, almost insulting, but the records remain. You help carry the finished cloak to the storage house, where it will wait wrapped and oiled until the time comes. Hira lays it down like a sleeping baby. You help fold the corners. One corner contains a single shell stitched inside the hem. Not valuable, just specific. Every cloak must say one thing no one else can hear, she says. You nod slowly. In the late afternoon, a group of elders tell stories of trades gone beautifully and horribly wrong. One cloak exchanged for a prized greenstone, another mistakenly used as a dog blanket. A fight over a kakahu that led to a marriage out of pure spite. The stories shift between laughter and reverence with ease. Before dinner, you return to your own cloak. It's heavier now, not just physically but emotionally. You add another row of twining, steady and deliberate. You don't count knots anymore. You feel them. You reach into your pouch and pull out the flax strip Kuya Mir gave you yesterday. Without fully thinking, you tie it into the inside collar of your cloak. A hidden message, a promise to continue. That evening, someone plays a slow rhythm on a carved wooden drum. You sit with your cloak over your lap and realize how many hands have woven their way into your thoughts. Mara's laughter, Hira's calm precision, Rangi's silence, Kuyamire's unwavering gaze. And then you think, if this cloak were traded tomorrow, what would it say about you? You smile, probably not perfect, but listening. The next day, your feet take you to a place you haven't visited, before a hilltop on the far edge of the village. Where the wind is sharper, the flax grows in tighter clumps, and the clouds seem close enough to touch. You've been told to meet someone here, not for weaving, but for watching. You wait unsure what's supposed to happen when a wiry man named Pita arrives. He carries nothing but a long walking stick and a rolled woolen cloak tied over one shoulder. You've learned how to weave, he says, scanning the horizon. Now you'll learn how to wear it. You laugh until you realize he's serious. Today's lesson isn't about threads or patterns. It's about the cloak as tool shield armor. Pita explains that not all kakahu were ceremonial. Some were made for travel, for battle, for cold, wet mountain paths and long nights on canoe decks. Worn right, a cloak could block rain, cradle a baby, carry dried food, even be twisted into a rope in an emergency. He shows you how to wear one folded over the shoulder, to free your hands tied tight across the chest, to block wind loosened low around the back when sleeping. He pulls out a heavier pake, a type of rain cloak woven from flax and sometimes lined with toi or dog hair. It rustles like dry grass when it moves and smells faintly of ash and wet forest. Historians still puzzle over the balance between form and function. Were these garments really so practical? Or has their utility been exaggerated by time? You don't need a debate. Just 5 minutes in the cold wind wearing Pita's pake is enough to know this cloak works. He leads you on a short hike across the ridge. The wind tugs at your clothes, rain spatters your arms. Your rough flax cloak helps, but you suddenly understand why those who traveled or hunted wore the heavier ones. These weren't museum pieces, they were survival gear. You rest under a grove of stunted trees. Pita pulls out dried eel and mashed kumara from a pouch tied inside his cloak. You share in silence, wind whistling softly through the leaves. Then he asks, Did you ever think a cloak could save your life? You shake your head. You hadn't. He nods. They still can. You walk back down the hill slowly, your cloak now heavy with drizzle and meaning. In the village, people are preparing for the evening gathering. Tonight is for stories, and not just the funny or sacred ones. Tonight is for fights. You sit by the fire as the elders and weavers recount arguments that took place over cloaks, someone who wore the wrong kakahu to a ceremony, a disputed border pattern between two iwi, a cloak meant for gifting that was kept instead. These weren't petty squabbles. Cloaks held status identity and social memory. Wearing the wrong one could insult an entire lineage. A woman named Anahera tells how her grandfather once accused another family of stealing his great-uncle's cloak. The case wasn't resolved for 32 years. When it was finally returned, the feathers had faded, but the memory hadn't. We still don't talk to their cousins, she says with a smirk. Cloaks, it seems, could bring warmth or war. It depended entirely on context and intention. Later, someone places a cloak over the shoulders of a young boy. It's slightly too big for him, but the look on his face is unmistakable pride. It's his first cloak. Kish, you remember what that feels like? The weight, the warmth, the responsibility. You return to your weaving post and run your hands along your nearly finished piece. You add one more row, then another. The knots come easily now. You don't need to think about where your fingers go. You just let them listen. Before bed, you sit under the stars and try wrapping your cloak the way Peta showed you. Shoulder, fold, pull, knot, it holds. Chat, and in that moment, you understand something simple, something quiet. A cloak is more than the sum of its materials. It's not just what it's made from, it's what it's made for. To protect, to carry, to speak, to forgive. You pull it close and fall asleep under a sky full of stars and wind. This morning, the air feels heavy with meaning, not with sadness or even celebration, just significance. You wake with the quiet realization that your time here is winding down. The cloak across your knees is nearly done. The fibers lie flat. The rows are even. The knots, yours. Today, your teacher is Tama, a man who's both too young and too old, his smile boyish, his eyes carved from time. He's here to show you something few are ever invited to see. Ready to read between the threads, he asks. You follow him to a side hut tucked behind the main weaving shelter. Inside is a single cloak laid out on a broad wooden table. At first glance, it's simple, plain flax, no feathers, no bright dyes. But Tama gestures you closer. Look again. You squint. And there it is. The pattern isn't in color, it's in texture. Raised knots, twisted pairs, a shift in tension. Running diagonally through the body of the cloak is a symbol. An angular spiral, almost like a carved koru pattern, but visible only in how the light hits the threads. It's not obvious. You wouldn't see it unless someone told you it was there. Hidden meanings, he says, coded language. He explains that many weavers, especially in times of unrest, embedded symbols into their cloaks, not just decorative flourishes, but messages. A line to say we remember. A shift in the weave to mark an ancestor. A triangle to say we forgive but not forget. Historians still debate whether these designs were widely understood or kept as private signals. Some think entire stories were passed this way like secret letters worn over the heart. Tama doesn't offer an answer. He simply says, the people who knew knew. You ask if any of your own knots carry meaning now. He shrugs, grins. That's your business. You return to your cloak and begin inspecting it like a stranger. And suddenly, it's full of messages. The red feather near the collar, ebi vei memory, the slightly uneven row. A night you nearly gave up, the dark twist in the middle. A story you haven't told out loud yet. Every piece of your cloak is a sentence in a language you didn't know you were fluent in. Tama shows you other cloaks, ones with repeating lines like musical notation, ones with mirrored edges suggesting twins, ones woven in deliberate silence, row after row without a single spoken word during their creation. Those are the heavy ones, he says, the ones made of grief. You sit in stillness, hands resting on your own work, and feel the weight of the unspoken. Later, he takes you to the edge of the forest where an older woman, barefoot, eyes like stormlight, is dyeing flax with crushed berries. Her cloak, worn and faded, has 3 broken rows near the bottom. You ask if they're mistakes. No, she says, that's the part that made me stop and start again. The rows aren't perfect, but they're honest. Maybe that's what a cloak is meant to be. In the evening, Tama returns with a small group. Each person carries a cloak they've made or inherited. They don't speak. They simply lay the cloaks on the ground in a ring, sit beside them, and rest. No ceremony, no chants, just presence. You're invited to join. You lay yours down a little shyly and sit beside it. It doesn't sparkle. It's not lined with rare feathers, but it's yours. You know every knot, every hesitation, every decision. And within that silence, you start to feel what Tama meant. The cloak speaks even now. You hear its voice not in words, but in the cool evening air brushing your face, in the soft grass beneath your fingers, in the way someone across the circle glances at your cloak and nods. It has become part of the story. That night before sleep, you pick up your cloak and hold it close, not like a possession, but like a companion. You tuck your face against its edge and whisper one word quietly to no one seen. The final morning arrives, like a tide, slow, steady, and impossible to stop. The village moves with the quiet efficiency of a place that has seen many arrivals and just as many departures. No one announces it, but everyone knows you'll be leaving soon. Your cloak is done. It lies folded beside you, heavy and soft-smelling of smoke, rain, and time. You run your hands across its surface one last time, feeling every shift in tension, every knot tied by your once clumsy fingers. It's not perfect, but you understand now that perfection was never the goal. Their presence was. Today, your role is not to weave or learn or help. It's to gift. You've been asked to assist in presenting a cloak to someone returning to the village, a young woman who has spent years away and has come home to be with her wānau. She's to be welcomed not just with words, but with warmth, wrapped in the story of her people. The cloak you'll help present is dazzling layers of tui feathers, a border of gold-dyed flax, a collar lined with old kahuhuruhuru strands gifted by an elder. But the ceremony itself, simple, grounded. One person speaks softly about her journey. Another ties the cloak gently over her shoulders. No applause, just silence and the rustle of feathers meeting skin. You understand something in that moment, something that had hovered in the background this whole time. The act of cloaking is sacred. It's not just clothing, it's claiming, a wrapping of mana, of recognition, of belonging. Sash. Historians still puzzle over the line between practical and ceremonial in Maori garments. But you've come to see that the line doesn't matter. Even the most humble cloak becomes sacred the moment it touches someone with care. After the ceremony, the girl approaches you. She doesn't speak. She just touches the hem of your cloak, then places her forehead gently to yours. A hungi, the sharing of breath. You've never felt more seen. Later, you sit with Mara and Hemi one last time. You show them the cloak, holding it up like a tapestry. They nod approvingly. No corrections, no jokes, just Mara's quiet. Not bad outsider, and Hemi's warm. You'll carry it well. You ask what to do with it now? Mara shrugs. Wear it when you're cold. Hang it when you're proud. Fold it when you need to remember who you are. You laugh. Then you don't, because the words stay with you. As the sun begins to set, you walk to the edge of the village with your pack slung over one shoulder, your cloak over the other. The kids wave. The dogs bark once then lie back down. The weavers return to their mats, already threading new fibers between fingers. And you turn back once to look at the weaving shelter, the threads drying in the wind, the dye pots still warm, the long lines of cloaks on the rafters like sleeping birds. Then you breathe in deep, pull your cloak around your shoulders, and take the first step home. You carry more than cloth now, you carry time. You walk for a long while after leaving the village. The trees thin, the light changes, sounds shift from the rustle of woven mats to the hush of your own footsteps. No one follows, but somehow the presence of the people, the work, the feathers, it follows you anyway. Not in a haunting way, just quietly. Your cloak rests across your shoulders like it belongs there. It moves when you do, catches the breeze, hugs the wind. It's not just fabric anymore. It's the story of everything you didn't know you were learning. You stop near a bend in the trail and lay the cloak across your lap. The sun filters through its loose edges, casting shadows on your skin. You turn it slowly in your hands, thinking back through it each section, the bark you soaked and softened until it split like butter under the blade. the hours spent hunched at the church twisting threads that refused to listen until they did. The feathers you gathered gently like apologies to the forest. The laughter, the stories, the silences between. The secrets stitched beneath the surface, your red feather, the uneven knot, the green strip from Kuyamir that still smells like dried kawakawa. All of it is here. Even now, as you sit alone on the edge of the world, the cloak wraps you in the presence of others. You remember how they taught you not with lectures, but with hands, not with rules, but with rhythm. You learn to read a pattern like a sentence, to weave a silence like a prayer. And above all, you learned that nothing woven by hand is ever just an object. It's a connection, a decision, a promise. Historians still debate whether cloaks were more valuable than weapons, whether they held more social capital than titles, whether they counted more in ceremony than words. You know your answer now. You rise, brush off the leaves, and sling the cloak across your shoulders once more. There's no crowd, no farewell speech, no carved post to mark your leaving, just you and the wind and the weight of the story you now carry. As dusk begins to fall, you descend the trail slowly with purpose. You feel the strands of the cloak shift with your steps. It moves like breath, like water, like memory. And somewhere just out of sight, you imagine the threads of your life stretching outward, looping back through forests and fires, and feathers tangled, yes, but woven now and strong. So now the journey is ending, and all that's left is stillness. The cloak is folded quietly at your side. Its weight lingers not in your arms anymore, but deeper, in the chest, in the place where memories settle after they stop being loud. You're tired, but not the kind of tired that aches, the kind that hums, that tells you yes, enough was done today. No more knots, no more threading, just rest. The wind outside has softened. The leaves don't rustle anymore, they whisper. Your breath slows, and even if your body's curled beneath blankets, your mind is still on that weaving mat, fingers brushing flax heart, listening for the next knot to pull tight. There's no rush now, no more sections to complete. The cloak is finished, but the story, it keeps going. Somewhere someone else is picking up their first bundle of flax. Somewhere a weaver hums to themselves. Somewhere a baby is being wrapped in a cloak made by hands that loved them long before they arrived. You are part of that now. Not as an expert, not even as a guest, but as someone who paused long enough to listen, to thread, to care. So breathe. Let the feathers settle. Let the night deepen. Let the threads hold you. And sleep knowing that even in stillness you are wrapped in story.